For Sunday, April 22nd, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, the City Hall corruption scandal widens. In DeKalb County, a sick out by school bus drivers, and the regents say no to a tuition increase. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday. We now know that the name of Kasim Reed has been mentioned for the first time in the widening Atlanta City Hall corruption scandal. Not that he's named as a defendant or anything, no, but simply that his records have been subpoenaed, the same expense records that we've talked about on this broadcast now for several weeks. He was one of about 4 or 5 people whose records were subpoenaed, but as we try to analyze where this investigation is going, we know that, for example, bribes were paid. We don't yet know to whom. Now we get a new player, Katrina Taylor Parks, a deputy chief operating officer. You don't know her, I don't know her. Interesting. She got paid $200,000 a year and she'd had 3 personal bankruptcies. Do you put people into jobs with fiduciary responsibility who have had 3 personal bankruptcies, Phil?
Well, the answer is no. And I think to look at the bigger picture, and I know we'll be breaking this down and discussing it more, you're right, this is a very serious federal probe, and subpoenas were issued, to your point, to this Katrina Taylor Parks, the deputy chief of staff to Mayor Reed, and is still on the city payroll, although she claims she's on a sick leave. And then you
Very sick.
You have
she got sick the day after the subpoenas.
Yeah, yeah, and she would not answer questions to the media, but more importantly, in my opinion, is the fact that former Mayor Reed's use of his P card, the city-issued P card, the subpoena is there for the records, and it goes into potential abuse. So I think that more will be unfolding, and of course there's a second thing I know we're going to talk about is what's going on with Invest Atlanta and what happened under Mayor Reed. So this is a terrible, terrible blight on the city of Atlanta. I hope Keisha Lance Bottoms, the new mayor, is going to take control quickly and institute reforms.
Well, Carrie, go ahead, Alexis.
Well, I was going to, in response to what Phil just said, the current mayor already has started taking steps to clarify things and be more open with open records, the open checkbook that we talked about last week.
You're right, but not contracting and not these other things.
But she has ordered an audit, and all that stuff is ongoing. The other thing that I would say is that to your point about the personal bankruptcies, we have a president of the United States who's had 4 personal bankruptcies.
Not personal.
Not personal.
Those are business
but he's a private business.
And probably half of all businesses in America are
separate corporations that are set up.
Okay,
all right. But personal bankruptcy is a different deal. Carrie, welcome back. Carrie Hector's with us, and I'm fascinated by a little tentacle of this corruption investigation. Fog fuels. A fellow named Paul Marshall went to the city and said that he could turn fats, oils, and greases into fuel for the city.
Yes.
Somehow the city council approved that 8-4, a vote I haven't looked at to see who was on what side, and Fog Fuels never delivered to the city.
Yeah, well,
it was a sole source contract never awarded, I guess.
That's what I understand. Spokesman for the city said that the contract was never executed. Mr. Marshall, in a deposition in one of his many fraud cases, indicated that it was. More recently, Mr. Marshall, who was under indictment for 14 counts of wire fraud, pled guilty to one of those, which sounds like he made a deal with somebody. And if he made a deal with somebody, that's bad news for the people who probably negotiated that contract on behalf of the city.
Well, it's just, it spreads and spreads and spreads. It's a sole source contract for Fog Fuels. It's emergency snow removal contracts. This thing is spreading, and these subpoenas, now what I wonder is, do the subpoenas mean, as one news outlet reported, that Mayor Kasim Reed will have to go before a federal grand jury? in May? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think we're soon going to know the answer, because as Carrie is pointing out and you're pointing out, the tentacles are spreading. And we remember just a couple weeks ago, the U.S. Attorney, who was overseeing this ongoing and expanding federal corruption probe, said the culture of corruption starts at the top, and that was a direct shot at former Mayor Reed.
Now, let me to your point about Mayor Lance Bottoms.
Yes.
She's in a tough spot.
She is, and she is chair of the Invest Atlanta board.
My point.
And she's
there she was sitting next to a woman named Dr. Eloisa Clementic.
Yes.
Who makes $300,000 a year. Well, government work is really good these days.
It depends on what job you have and what level you have.
True. If you're a DeKalb County school bus driver, not so good.
Not so much. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But she has ordered an independent review of the transaction, which was the money that the Invest Atlanta's nonprofit wing paid to the city once the city paid them.
To reimburse Kasim Reed's expense account.
Yes, to reimburse for
charges.
The amazing thing about that is that after that $309,000 a year contract was signed, and that includes 2 years worth of severance if she's ever replaced, on the same day the money went to Invest Atlanta, that eventually came back fully laundered through Invest Atlanta and funded Mayor Reed's trip to South Africa with his entourage, that $90,000 trip. It covered the luxury aspects of the trip.
Yeah,
that's right, Gary.
And
it was a dormant nonprofit, and I think the use of the word laundered is correct. And I think it's an outrageous thing. The contract is outrageous.
Well, I'd also would note that it was done in December of last year, which was before Mayor Bottoms was
well, and as Kasim Reed, remember what he did in his last 2 months. When he was the mayor, he did this deal with Invest Atlanta, ratified that contract. Dr. Eloisa Clementic gets $600,000 and change if she's fired for cause. Amazing.
I don't think not for cause, but if she's just fired, she can be let go.
Okay, well,
but if she gets fired for
she
cause,
will go happily.
Well, she
I mean, let's be blunt. The other thing he did, of course, was the pension board thing, which hasn't fully unraveled yet. It's amazing, and to all of the on the left who complain about religious freedom and, gosh, will this hurt us from getting Amazon? Do you think Amazon is watching this City Hall fiasco? I do.
You're making a good point. I don't think Amazon would want to deal with a city hall that's every few weeks we see more evidence of corruption.
Well, I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of what's going on.
Would you want to deal with a city like that?
That's evidence of perhaps possibly past corruption. There's no evidence of current corruption.
Well, it's an ongoing probe.
Remember where Amazon is coming from, the People's Republic of California, which is a sanctuary state.
Well, so Seattle, Washington, yeah. Same thing.
Yeah,
Seattle is,
the left coast. They're coming from the left coast. And when all is said and done, I think that Georgia, notwithstanding what's happening in Atlanta, still is the best place to do business in the country.
Let's give a quick mention to one other major local story unfolding as we tape, which is the sick out by DeKalb County school bus drivers, inconveniencing thousands of parents, making their day totally uncertain. And the school system on Thursday said your child may get home 60 minutes to 90 minutes late. Well, that can play heck with some schedules, can't it?
Yes, it can.
And then Dr. Steve Green, the superintendent, fired some 7 drivers late Thursday night. It looks like more to come. You could commend him for taking a strong stand, but we don't have all the facts yet, but to my mind, I think these drivers have been neglected. Yeah. Recession.
Well, everybody in public education has been. You know, they've had
principals,
salaries frozen. Everybody.
Anybody who's got a 6-figure job has not been neglected. Come on. And all these principals make 6 figures and they cheat. Anyway, all right, when we return, how about Blue Cross Blue Shield? Carrie's here. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Now, I don't want to ascribe magic powers to Governor Nathan Deal, but he said a week or so ago that he was going to step into the contract dispute between the Piedmont Healthcare Systems and Blue Cross Blue Shield. He did, and like magic, an agreement was reached, Carrie.
We are going to miss this governor.
Good point.
He is amazingly competent and effective. He said he was going to step in. He stepped in. He met with both parties. He put pressure on them, and magically they came up with a 3-year deal that not only is going to cover the Piedmont healthcare system, but is going to cover the period that otherwise would have been a lapse, where people for the past month or so would have been regarded as being, Piedmont would have been regarded as out of network, which would have vastly increased the cost of all services delivered within that time frame. He got a deal that covers those people. None of the consumers are going to be hurt by this, and we got a new 3-year contract.
And that's 600,000.
600,000 people.
Well, and that's very well said. That's a true example of leadership when you have a governor, any public official, do that. And you know, it reminds us all that regardless of what party you're with or your ideology, one of the main things a public servant ought to do is to be helping people. And that's a great example of that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of helping people, and I don't know if the governor's behind this one, but Phil, the Board of Regents voted not to increase tuition at any of our colleges and universities. That actually shocked me.
Well, I'm not shocked. They've been under tremendous pressure, the regents, that is.
Yeah, but you always
for the
raise
last
tuition.
Few years. Yeah. Well, yes, and you know, you could, for some of the top schools like Tech in Georgia, you can make an argument because these are starting to become, and you could argue, world-class universities, but we got to look out for the students, and this is supposed to be mainly for our children and grandchildren here in Georgia, and it's got to be affordable. They did the right thing. I always have argued that, you know, there's a lot of fat in the colleges that can be cut, especially some of these politically correct programs that are nothing but garbage.
Wow.
Yeah, but you know, you mentioned it. Students in the university system have had a 77% cumulative tuition increase over the last, I think it's 8 or 10 years.
Yeah, that's
however many years, it's a lot.
Especially
and
covering the recession too.
That's
that
right.
Period. They raised.
Not students, moms and dads.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you for that clarification.
Well,
yeah.
a lot of students take those loans out themselves. So.
And that's true
That's
too.
true.
Both are true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we learned this week that there's something called the Army Futures Command. I had no idea what it was. It's fascinating. Atlanta is a finalist for that, like it's a finalist, I guess, for Amazon. But the Army Futures Command is looking at Atlanta. You know, we think of military posts as being sort of outside cities and scattered around. They're looking at Atlanta because of Georgia Tech, because of the volume of tech workers here in the city, in the metro area. That's just fascinating. How do you integrate? I get this mental picture of a bunch of lieutenants and captains having lunch next to a bunch of tech geeks, right? It's a new world.
This is the 21st century, you're right. And
and
even though I went to the University of Georgia, and some of my Georgia friends might be upset with me, but I do have to congratulate Tech and what it's done and what it continues to do. And it's a great resource, and to your point on being the #1 state to do business, Georgia Tech really has the infrastructure and the research and the
resources.
That's a great word, the resources.
And no place to park on campus.
That's true.
And then here's another one of these deals that we're going to have to keep an eye on. The Congress, the Republican Congress, has approved something called opportunity zones to grow the economy in rural areas. And Senators Isaacson and Perdue congratulated the government for doing so. It looks to me like, didn't Bill Clinton have something called opportunity zones?
Or enterprise zones.
Enterprise zones, but they were in cities. And nothing ever got done, did it?
Well,
it was midnight basketball that they had.
No, that wasn't enterprise.
Wasn't that it?
No,
Okay.
some things got done and some people got well, but not everybody.
Right. So now we got to keep an eye on these rural areas, and we'll see. And then on the economy, a record number of people have jobs. That's pretty cool. And I want to say this, Carrie, this is probably right in your wheelhouse. I want to discuss the fact that Harold Melton is the new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Georgia. And I do not want to say it, but I'll just say it real quickly. He's the second black person to hold that job.
Justice Benham came before him.
How about Leah Sears Ward, too?
Stanley is third. That's right. You're absolutely right.
But it's interesting. When Harold Melton got the job this time, nobody pointed out the fact that he was black. That's a good thing. He earned it.
So does everybody who had it. The position earned it.
Well, I know, but you didn't have to point it out.
Well, it is good that it is not first anymore.
Right.
I'll agree with you.
That's my point.
When it becomes a pattern, it becomes less of newsworthy. And it's not real news anymore that African American jurists can rise to the highest office in the judicial system in the state of Georgia. It's not big news because it has happened, and there is a pattern of that occurring,
normal.
and it's a good thing.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yes.
We don't have to pick at the scab. We just say, here it is. Here's Harold Melton. He's qualified. He's served well on the court.
Qualified. Highly.
Yeah, that's good. All right. When we come back, we'll turn to what we do best, politics. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And the primary elections in Georgia are just 5 weeks away. They're on us. And you can see the pace picking up on television. Clearly, the ad volume right now belongs to Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, Stacey Evans has made a substantial buy-in. We've talked about her commercials, Alexis, but that one where she grew up in trailers, a whole bunch of them in Ringgold, is really starting to, I didn't think I'd want to see it more than once, but it's actually very effective.
It is
what it says about Georgia values and what it says about her accomplishments and the Hope Scholarship.
It is an effective ad, and I think that both of them have very effective ad campaigns going too. Stacey Abrams is now running her bio campaign, growing up poor, moving from Mississippi to Atlanta, being the valedictorian of her high school, being turned away from the governor's mansion because she was black. She got off a MARTA bus with her parents and couldn't come in. So her story, you know, is relatable to people who are underprivileged, if you will, or otherwise not of the manner born, just like Stacey Evans. So they have similar approaches.
We have a poll from the University of Georgia that tells us that Stacey Abrams, here we go again, I have to always pause. Stacey Abrams is at 33%, Stacey Evansville at 15%, 50% undecided. It's not surprising to me.
That isn't surprising, and you've got a lot of undecideds on the Republican side too. But the ad wars have started, and it's going to get nasty on both party primaries, and it's already starting. You mentioned, Dick, on the Republican side, Casey Cagle had a huge ad buy, over $4 million. However, what made news this week was Clay Tippins, who was an outside latecomer in the primary, a Cobb County business person, took a shot at Hunter Hill, who some Republicans think could be in the #2 runoff slot. That's the big thing in the Republican primary. Who's going to make the runoff with Cagle? Because he's not, mathematically, he can't get 50+1. Is it going to be Hunter Hill? Is it going to be Clay Tippins? Tippins on this ad, which I think was a mistake, implied that Hunter Hill, a very decorated veteran, was Benedict Arnold. I thought that was over the top, and I think that that needs to be, Tippins needs to pull that back. But it does hurt Hill because it points out that Hill got a C rating from the NRA, and of course the National Rifle Association is looked at very favorably by the Republican base.
Carrie, I think that commercial points to a problem in that primary for the Republicans. If they all muddy each other, if they all attack each other, there's a chance, I think it's remote, but there's a chance Casey Cagle could win without a runoff. He's out there by himself.
That's true.
I don't think mathematically, I think Phil's right.
I don't see that happening.
I don't either.
But all the trash just doesn't work.
When I look at what's happening with these ads and what is likely to happen if the past is prelude, well, you know, we have a governor who's brought great dignity to the office, and I think that these people who are running for that office ought to be focused on demonstrating that they have the ability and the qualities necessary to sit in the chair that he has occupied for 8 years.
Well, let me give an example.
That didn't happen in the presidential race.
You could legitimately attack Hunter Hill because he proposes to eliminate the state income tax. I personally support that. I'm just not sure it can be done.
Well, it needs to be phased down, and these are just kind of bumper sticker slogans. I agree with you to a great extent, Carrie, but Politics 101 is also driving up the negatives of your opponents. And on the Republican side, one of those folks has desperately got to get into that second spot to challenge Lieutenant Governor Cagle. And so you do have to
and by the way, right now, that's Brian Kemp, whom we haven't even mentioned.
Well, you do have to throw some punches, and you're going to see some punches being thrown. Yeah, you have to introduce yourself. In fact, that should have probably been done a lot sooner, you could argue. But and same on the Democratic side, there's a knife fight going on between Stacey Evans and Stacey Abrams. And there's a racial component. You've said it yourself.
Well,
there's a racial component
because one of the candidates is black. However, the thing about this campaign is this the first time there's been a challenge in the primary since 2010 when Roy Barnes dispatched a few opponents. Last time, you know, Jason Carter ran unopposed. So this is a little bit different for the Democrats to.
Well, the Evans-Abrams race is so interesting because while Evans is running a nice campaign so far, the majority of the vote in the Democratic primary is going to be African American. Right. And that's going to trend towards Stacey Abrams.
I agree.
And it's going to be hard for Evans to break into that. But what's happened is that I think in the general election, you know, it's nice to win a primary and be a party nominee, but you got to have the long game. And with Stacey Abrams, the fact that she never condemned the disruption of Stacey Evans' speech last January at the Netroots left-wing conference, that has hurt Abrams to this day with independents and moderates, let alone conservatives. Free speech is important. I know you know that.
And I know she knows that too.
Well, she did not. She never condemned what happened.
Okay, so it's not a knife fight?
I don't think it's a knife fight. I wouldn't characterize it as they're not that
nasty.
different. They're both
social
Democrats.
media. You know social media.
Butter knives. Butter knives.
Well, no, I was going to ask Alexis if it's not a knife fight, would I be sexist if I said it's a knitting needle fight?
Yes, you
I
would.
would be.
Yes, you would.
Darn it.
Yeah.
Just try to be politically correct here. Lieutenant Governor's race, not much to talk about.
You're bad.
David Schaefer got the endorsement of the National Rifle Association. I think he's the front runner on the Republican side. The Democrat nominee is somewhat unknown.
I think
we'll
you're
get to
right.
know her as the campaign goes along.
David Schaefer got a big boost a week ago. He was totally exonerated from these bogus accusations by a disgruntled lobbyist.
There we go. All right, when we come back, we will go to winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And thank all of you who join us on Facebook. Interesting discussions going on there on the Georgia Gang page. And of course, we're on YouTube, which starts a whole new train of conversation. Winners and losers, Phil, I'll start with you.
Well, a winner was John Williams, the legendary developer, philanthropist. You could have a whole segment just on what he did. He was kind of Mr. Cobb County and helped create a modern Cobb County. He was one of the founders of the modern Community Improvement District, along with Roy Barnes and Johnny Isakson in the 80s, which is a model and has boosted economic development. He was 75 years old, died unexpectedly. He had two great hits, two publicly traded companies. First was Post Properties, a great company, and then another great company, Preferred Apartment Communities. He started 5 years ago, a REIT, and I'll end it at that, but it's a sad loss. And I've got a winner. I have to go back to what we discussed earlier, Governor Nathan Deal, true leadership with the whole Piedmont Blue Cross Blue Shield. And my loser is unfortunately Atlanta's reputation because of what's happened under former Mayor Reed. I hope we can rebound, and I hope the new mayor can help us rebound.
Okay. Kerry.
I have two winners. One is former State Bar and ABA President Linda Klein, who is continuing to work on access to justice for veterans. Far too many veterans have serious legal issues that prevent them from getting back on to their lives, and she is working on raising money for a nonprofit called the Center for Veterans and Military Legal Services. She's looking for foundations and philanthropists to assist in that endeavor, and she's to be congratulated for those efforts. My second winner is the Earth, because when the public sees this broadcast, it will be Earth Day. Started by the last of our great environmental presidents, Richard M. Nixon, who also created the EPA.
Right, there you go.
Actually, I thought Earth Day was started by a lefty senator from Wisconsin named Gaylord Nelson. You've educated me.
There you go.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, I want to congratulate the Arthur
Can
M.
you lift
Blank.
it?
I know, it's a wonderful, heavy book. The Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation sponsored, along with the ADL, a session on social justice as part of their speaker series. And this book was, one of the journalists who worked on this book was there. They had a panel discussion. And the book covers 100 years of social justice work in America. And it's very informative and interesting. I also want to recognize AIB Network, had its annual John Allen Awards, named for the founder of the network.
That's a religious channel?
It's interfaith.
Interfaith, yeah.
But it's focuses on nonprofits, and the top winner was Andy Young, and the Wilbur and Helen Glenn Foundation for
right.
their philanthropy.
Got to get out.
Sorry.
Out of time here. I will second John Williams, no relation, a great developer. And boy, was the whole city breathed deeply and sighed when Freddie Freeman got hit on the same wrist as he did last year. And he's okay. That's where the sigh came from. So we're not going to have a repeat of that thing last year where he missed 7 weeks of play. And that's all I've got. We will see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.